In my very last recording, I talked all about the 1902 model course, and I was kind of saying that this was a pretty harsh experience for young people, the 1902 curriculum. And we know in 1902 that this was this kind of military drill curriculum. It was produced by the War Office, right? Well, what we're going to sort of do now is we're going to fast forward about 31 years, and we're going to pass by a load of additional curriculums that took place. There was, I think it was 1904, 1909, 1919, all of which were written by a guy called Dr. George Newman, a medical officer. Dr. George Newman, he was really the reforming force that got rid of that old model course. And where we end up with is we end up in 1933 with what we're going to talk about today, which is the syllabus of PT, the syllabus of physical training. And I was kind of excited about 5 minutes ago when I was doing a quick search for some images, because I found this one up here where we've actually got the physical training 1933 syllabus itself here in all its glory. And I'm going to refer back to some of its contents as we go through this particular video. But the first thing we want to recognize is that in 1933, the syllabus was PT, physical training, okay? PT, or physical training. So that's not to say it was an education curriculum, it was a training curriculum. So it still had elements of kind of military fitness and obedience and centralization, all those kind of things. It was not yet an educational child-central, child-centered curriculum. And because of that, in 1933, we can say that this curriculum was still centralized, and we can see that with this image just here, right? I mean, this is actually taken from 1933, albeit I think it might be from the US, but anyway, you can see that these children are clearly following a centralized instruction of how to move. So we still consider this 33 curriculum to be a centralized model. And when we say centralized, what we mean is that there was still a command style in play. Okay, so it was still a command style. The teacher, by now they had teachers, which I'll mention in a second, was still informing and telling the children what to do. However, we did have some changes. There was some group work. Okay, so there was some, if you like, some decentralized parts. So let's actually have a look at that. We've actually got that. But this is actually an extract here from the 33 syllabus book, and we can see here that these are kind of like group activities, right? I mean, I know we haven't got real clear details, but you can clearly see that these are game-based, right? Group activities, simple games that are taking place. And it was presented in this way because it helped the teachers, because we say that these things here are what we call tables, okay? So they're tables of exercises. So we need to add that as one of our key points, right? That the syllabus was actually presented in a series of tables, okay? When we say tables, if you like, some of the planning was done for the teachers. It was kind of saying, look, this is what you need to do. Let's actually put into there teaching tables. Teaching tables. So I can imagine if you were sort of a teacher and you had to teach physical training and you got this lovely green book through the post or however it arrived, you'd probably be quite excited, right? Because you think, okay, this is what we've got to do. These are the ideas. Some of them presumably would have been quite novel, quite new. Okay, some of them, like these sort of things, look quite traditional. And you can almost see the similarity here, right, between these individual exercises and what's being done down here. It's quite calisthenic in its nature. But if we just come back down here, so this 19, we've got these teaching tables. And the other thing that I'd sort of like to mention at this point while we're talking about the methodology side with the teaching tables is the recommendation was for 5 lots of 20-minute lessons per week. Okay, so it was recommended that the kids did daily exercise for 20 minutes at a time. Now, look, 5 times 20 is 100 minutes, right? In today's modern curriculum, we've got a recommendation of 120 minutes over the course of a week. So this isn't so different. We also say that the recommendation for physical activity for young people is an hour a day. So you see that daily rhythm of this within this particular curriculum. You do have some similarities, albeit it's done in a different way. And another factor with regard to the methodology is that another recommendation in 1933 was that at least some of the exercises were done outdoors in the open air. Okay, so I guess it depended where you lived and how much pollution there was, for example. But it was encouraged that young people got out of the school and took part in open air conditions. So what we found a lot of was a playground tradition being established. So there was often a playground being used. And you think about your own kind of school experiences, you probably will find that the playground, at least of some of the schools that you went to, will have been covered in sort of like little mini game activities. They've been painted for lines where you had to climb up a snake, or you had to get in groups, or those little things that are painted all over kind of playgrounds. This is where it comes from, right? That's what this should be telling you. This is the origin of that sort of activity, albeit just childhood is kind of another start point as well. We had the development of some facilities as well in 1933, and specifically when we talk about facilities, we are talking about gymnasia. So these specialist facilities were, things like gymnasia, right? I mean, you can probably start to think again about how your school structures have been structured. Think about what was available in your primary school and your secondary school. There probably was some gymnasium that was developed between the 30s and the 60s, because that's the kind of thing that was being done within this sort of period, within this sort of epoch. So we sort of see the trends of some of this in kind of today's society. On the positive side, the 1933 syllabus was taught by specialist PE teachers. Okay, so this kind of profession had developed substantially from the days of the 1902 model course, and were now employing, training and developing specialist PE teachers. They tended to be male at this point, so they tended to be predominantly male. And we also find with young people, with the children themselves, is that they were expected to wear kits. So they were expected to change clothes, which sort of makes me think about this bit. That wouldn't have been very long, right? 20 minutes to get changed, do some PT, get changed again. Not sure how practical that would have actually been in those types of scenarios. So, these are some of the key features of this particular curriculum. Let's just go into our idea of how do we do it. Last time we said that we had objectives. We had, I can't remember what colours I used in the last video, so apologies if these are now different. Objectives, methodology, and, sorry, it was the other way around. Let me just actually get this right. It was objectives, content, and methodology in that particular order. Objectives, content, and finally we had methodology. So let's actually have methodology. So let's actually have a look at this. So in terms of objectives, we certainly would have seen an objective being fitness or increased fitness. We certainly would have seen it being as increased health, for example. And remember that 14 years earlier or 15 years earlier, you got the end of the First World War, a war that decimated British population, which was really harsh, really horrible. The content, of course, was slightly different at this time. We had some group work. Okay, so very different to the 1902 model course. We had some gymnastics. And we also sort of had mobility and stretching exercises, right? Sometimes they would have been done to music. Mobility, stretching, exercise, what we might sort of loosely call calisthenics, right? And the methodology we might describe from some of the points we made earlier on, we'd say, wrong colour, we would say that, for example, it was in the open air or it was outdoors. It was delivered by teachers. We might say specialist teachers, right, rather than NCOs from previously. We would say that there were some facilities. Okay, we've sort of talked about that. But we're also still saying it was relatively centralised or teacher-centred. So it's still a centralised experience. Okay, so these sort of experiences were at the heart of this 1933 curriculum. In our next recording, we'll look specifically at what was provided in the 1950s and how that really formed the platform for an educational syllabus which has been built and developed on until today, which is, the next syllabus we'll look at is really going to form the underpinnings of what we've got today. Okay, thanks for listening and tuning for the 1950s, planning the programme and moving and growing. Thanks very much.